Shalom, this is Avraham Shira here at Kever Rachel. You see we're surrounded by 25-foot concrete walls that were built to protect the Jews, protect the Kever. We used to come here when it was wide open fields. There was a graveyard, olive trees, very pastoral type place. It's become a fortress, but thank God Kever Rachel is in good shape. We're going to take a little movie here, show you folks around. We're going here to pray and to learn, and this is what we do. And it's one of the top spots in Israel for holiness and people coming and going to connect to Hashem, through the holy tzedekis, the holy Matriarch Rachel Imenu. So I'm going to turn the camera around. So here you see a view of the some of the parking area at Kever Rachel. You see this giant wall of concrete. I was once told that this concrete came from Egypt under the good auspices of Yasser Arafat, who was an Egyptian businessman before he was put in power through the PA a few decades back. And apparently, like all good businessmen, they got their hands in the action. But this concrete structure, that changes the tone of the Kever, of the beautiful thing that's been here for 4,000 years, into a fortress type atmosphere. Now we've been here and there's been grenades flying and tear gas and screaming Arab youth, but it's also a place of people that come here to learn all night, say Tikkun Hatzot, mourn for the Mikdash. So this is what we got here. And it's a cold, wet day, so there's not a lot of action. Sometimes this place is so filled up you can't believe it. You think you're in the middle of town. So we're going to walk inside and take a peek. The famous story of how Rachel Imenu was buried here, of course, was that when she was giving birth to Binyamin, the Shevet Binyamin, that she died in childbirth, and Yaakov Avinu buried her here on the derech to Beit Lechem. As everybody knows, this was the pathway to leave Eretz Israel. Baghdad is about due east, and so this was one of the corridors across the Jordan River that the Jews would leave, and they would pass her grave first. And of course, Rachel Imenu, like any good mother, was praying for her children who were leaving home. And this is the Sod, one of the secrets of the exile. You see here, there's a beautiful Beit Midrash that was built in latter years, where there's a kollel, people learn all the time. And this is the place everybody likes to hang out when it's cold, get some cookie and coffees. And we've got pictures along the wall here. I don't know if it's going to come up too good on this. There's pictures here of how the Kever has looked over the centuries. And it's just an inspiring place. And as we've learned before on some of our classes about the importance of praying at the graves of tzaddikim, it's because there's a spark of their soul still there. And it's part of the spark that will rise again at the Techiyat HaMeitim. And what we don't do is pray to a tzaddik or a tzedekus, but in their merit we pray. And it's like a spiritual portal or a hotspot. So this is the main side for the men's entrance. And it's about mincha time now. You see here, these are the ancient pylons that have been here for several thousand years as well, that they incorporated in the new structure. And I'm just going to peek over here and take the camera into the women's section so people can get an idea what we have here. And it's always great to come here and this is the entrance to the women's section. As you can see, it's not very crowded today, but there's a great sense of devotion here. And the women that come here are often coming here from very desperate situations. And you feel that in the air. You feel the sincerity and the attachment and the hope of the women, very much so. So we're going to do a little class here today in a few moments, and we'll be uploading that to our Patreon site, and hopefully everyone will have a chance. We'll learn some Torah about the idea of Rachel Imenu, what she did, and what ideas that still live for us today. So God bless. We'll see you all there. Shalom. We're back here at Kever Rachel, and I just opened up to a Torah that we learned a month or two ago that involves the concept of Rachel Imenu, Kever Rachel, and it is a Torah like many of Rabbi Nachman's Torahs that every time you learn it, you see something new, which is, always exciting because that's what we're here for, is to see the newness of Hashem in the world, because that every day the world is new, and we just have to be new. So the Rebbe starts out in this Torah, Samech Zayin in Tinyana, 67. In Tinyana, he says, Bereshit le'enei kol Yisrael. He takes the first word of the Torah and the last words of the Torah, and he connects them conceptually by their ideas. Bereshit, ki yesh ananim demechasim ha'ena, shem romi rabati romi ze'irta. Now he jumps to a completely representational, metaphoric level. He says there are two coverings on the eyes. And one is called the Great Rome, and one is called the Small Rome. Now these are concepts that represent klipot, negative forces that prevent us from seeing the spiritual reality that's around us. And of course, the rabbis chose the powerful exile of Rome as the metaphoric symbol. There's a great one and a small one, and that really is speaking about Rome and its power to hide the Jews, hide the Jewish consciousness from God at the time of the Roman Empire. But then there's the Romi Rabati, which is really today, or the power, the concept of the Roman influence in the world from Edom, who was a grandson of Esav. This power is spread over the entire world. So this is important to us today, just as important it was when the Caesars were running around and, the Circus Maximus was full of fun. Okay, so, and he brings and then he jumps to another concept connected by the eyes, that the clouds return after the rain. Now these clouds are another metaphoric take on things that cover the eyes, that prevent our spiritual vision. And this is on the inside of your head and the outside of your head. This is what you see through the filters of your consciousness. It's what actually is on the physical world as well. And this is the light of the eyes that's reduced after somebody cries. I don't think I need to explain that too much. Anybody knows that after you've cried, a real cry, that it's really hard to look at anything, because you're not really at that physical level anymore. And I just taught about this. And the rabbis strengthen the idea that after someone cries in Masechet Shabbat, it says that the light of the eyes is diminished. Now, your soul emanates from your eyes. Rabbi Nachman has taught us about that in another Torah, Likutei Moharan. I believe it's Torah 97, the first section. He says over there that your actual nefesh is coming out of your eyeball. It is a projecting camera. Your soul is human-generated film that emits from your eye, strikes objects, and sends them back. So this is not just light. That's a very nice metaphor. It's soul. It's coming out of your eyes, and this is why the Gemara is strengthening the idea here that after a person cries, there's a diminishing of the light. But that's because you've kind of squeezed yourself a little hard when you cry, and it squeezes, so to speak, the old soul out of us, the old perception out of us. That when I cry, it's because I haven't seen things the way I would like to. And when you cry, you squeeze out that old vision. Guess what? You make room for a new one, which is a beautiful thing. So you get to see new again by removing the old way of looking at things. And that could be looking at Hashem, looking at Torah, looking at your wife, looking at the Jewish people. Anything, okay, can be elevated and transformed in your vision, dafka, through tears. All right. And now we connect to the idea of Rachel and Rachel Imenu, the idea of crying, the idea of the return of the covering of the eyes and its removal, which is all connected to Kever Rachel. And here we are at Kever Rachel. And you could probably hear the people saying Kaddish in the background, and you can probably hear a few screamings and other types of things happening, depending on who comes in. But nonetheless, it's always the action spot here in Jerusalem is at Kever Rachel. And we are in the city of Beit Lechem. And, well, there's a whole history behind all that. We're not going to go there now. What we want to know now is that this idea of the weakening of the eyesight, you see the brilliance of the Rebbe. He compares that to the sunset, which is a beautiful poetic idea, but it's not just poetic. It is metaphysical. And he tells us like this, this is the idea of the setting of the sun in the west. Because in the east the sun rises and the sun sets in the west. Now that is not a new idea for almost anybody. Until you understand, it's not just talking about the sun. It's talking about the light of the eyes. It's talking about the Jewish people. It's talking about the entire emigration of the human race. The human race began in the east, and it's been migrating west steadily for thousands of years. So the light, rachat b'mizrach, the light began to shine in the east. Of course, that first shining in the east is Avraham Avinu. He first spread the idea that there is one God. Now, there were other monotheistic people, of course, before Avraham, but Avraham said, we got to get this out there. This is important information. This is transformational stuff. This is the stuff that changes life and makes it worthwhile. It connects us all to God. So Avraham took it on, and he started in the east. And that's the idea of the sunrise in the shki'ah, in the Netz Ahama, when the sun comes up in the morning. And then, of course, this when the sun goes down in the west, the setting of the light, that the light will diminish as it goes west, which makes sense. We see that physically. I keep turning my head, and everybody's passing me over here, little kiddies and old folks, and it's just everybody has to look at what the band's doing on the camera. So it's all good, but the idea of the sun setting in the west is a little sad, folks, because it's talking about the exile. It's talking about the end of days. It's talking about what happens as the light of the great patriarchs and prophets that came out of the east. What happens when it goes west is it diminishes and diminishes until you get all the way to California. And, and that's, well, that's pretty much where it all ends. You got a little stop over in Hawaii, and then the east starts again. So keep this in mind as we go forward in the ideas, because now he brings in Kever Rachel, Rachel Imenu, ki ma'arav rashi tevot Rachel mevaka al bneiha. It's pretty clear, Rachel Imenu mevaka al bneiha. Those are the four letters, the Rashi Tevot of the word Ma'arav, that she's crying about her children as they are exiled to the west. And Yirmiyahu added on to this, as explained by the Arizal, Ki Shechina B'Ma'arav. That the Shechina is always related to the west. Now, when we take the lulav and etrog on Sukkot, we shake the lulav and etrog in 6 directions. Of course, the last direction is Malchut, that is the west. And that is the Shira that's connected or related to Shekhinah, which is Malchut, kingship, that wherever the Shekhinah shows up, that's where kingship is revealed. So if the Shekhinah lands on you, you become king, whether you like it or not. The Shekhinah landed on King David, and he wrote a lot of beautiful things. And the Shekhinah landed on Shlomo Melech, and he also wrote a lot of beautiful things. And they also led Am Yisrael through all the sturm and drang of developing a nation. And so the Shekhinah is that divine aspect in every man. And it is inside us, it is outside us, and it is looking to rest on us. Each person according to their level, their vessel, their ability to remain themselves and not, explode from the great light of God's presence in your life. Okay, but nonetheless, this Shekhinah in the West, Bocha mi'alelet. This Shekhinah herself is crying. And now we understand why we always talk about Rachel Imenu as crying for the Jewish people. Because the Shekhinah herself is crying for the Jews. Where? Why? Yisrael, because she's crying on the Jews. Rachel mivakar b'nea, the same idea. How will she be comforted because her sons are gone? They left Eretz Yisrael. We have to imagine what Eretz Yisrael was like 100 years ago. Have you seen pictures how empty it was here? How vacant it was? Well, it was vacant not just for us, but it was for the Shekhinah as well. Shehi bocha al tzara Yisrael. But the Shekhinah cries and weeps for the suffering of the Jews. Dafka amifuzarim agoyim ve'inam kamakumam. She's weeping about the Jews who are spread around the world. For the Jews in Long Island, and the Jews in Mexico City, and the Jews in LA, and the Jews in Hong Kong, and the Jews in Sydney, and the Jews in Athens. She's weeping about the Jews all over the world. And therefore, the setting of the sun is compared to the exile in the West. In other words, the curtain's going down. The stage lights are diminishing. Because through crying, the light is diminished. Which is the setting of the light. And this connects to the Western Wall. Why was it that the Western Wall was the wall that was left behind for us to pray at? Because it's facing west. It's facing the way the Jews would begin to migrate into the world. Shisham Shekhinah Bocha Miyalelet Al Churban Beit HaMikdash, because also there the Shekhinah is weeping about the destruction of the Mikdash. We have no idea what that event was like. Okay, Ki B'Ma'arav Sham Rachel Mivakar B'nei, and he repeats the same Rosh Tevot of that pasuk that Rachel Imenu is crying on her children. That's us. Now, if you've ever seen a mother cry for her children, which I'm sure many of you have, you might get a glimpse of that light, that power. And v'yesh more or more esh. But now the Rebbe says there are two types of light: the light that lights and the light that catches fire. Okay, and one is created connected the other, parallel to the light of the eyes that illuminates and the light of the eyes that brings fire. Because when there's power to the light of the eyes, then the power of the fire is diminished. And also the opposite. When the great light, the holy light is diminished, then guess what? The unholy light is empowered. We don't want this to happen. Of course, that parallels the destruction of the temple. And you hear this verse from Eicha. Now, Eicha was Lamentations. It was written by Yirmiyahu Navi. And what does he say? From the upper reaches, Marom is one of the levels of heaven, one of the seven firmaments, one of the seven psychic layers between us and the infinite. The rabbis give them all kinds of fancy names, but the names are actually indicative of the experience of the place. Marom, the exalted place, Shalach Eish Batzmotai, says they sent fire into my bones. And that's not a physical fire. But can you imagine a spiritual fire burning in your bones? Well, Yirmiyahu certainly could. Ki nitgabru me'orei eish ayidei istaku me'orei or, because the external, negative, judgmental fire was empowered over the great light of that is holiness. Kinet Rachel mevakei abaneah. So this crying of Rachel Imenu on the Jewish people also goes up and down. This weeping of the Shekhinah, the divine presence for the Jewish people. It's not static. It's not this, textbook thing that you look up in a metaphysical science book. Okay, it's something that goes up and down with the season and with the Jews. And when we're happy, the Shekhinah draws simcha. And when we're not happy, the Shekhinah suffers. Because that's part of the symbiotic relationship between the divine and the human. Ki abechiyahu bechinat istakut me'orei or azai mitgabrim chas v'shalom me'orei eish bechinat memarom shalach eish. Right, he repeats all the ideas that we just had, that either the holy fire is winning or the unholy fire, the unholy light. And it really depends on us. And we really don't want to deal with that fire again. That fire already destroyed 2 Beit Mikdashes and a lot of Jews, millions of Jews. And it would be very easy to say that fire was doing quite well in Germany and in Europe in World War II. So it is a metaphysical idea that becomes physical in human lives. It is not poetic. It is not a metaphor exclusively. It is used to teach us. The prophet spoke this way in order to teach us about events that were always in the potential. And now the Rebbe continues this Torah Samech Zayin, with a description that we learned before about when the fire, the light of the fire of the tzaddik is diminished because the tzaddik passes away. We know that Rabbi Nachman wrote this Torah after the passing of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, and so it had a very personal element to it, because tzaddikim were always close to each other, because when you love God and serve God with all your heart and soul, then you automatically connect to other people who love God and serve God with all their soul. It's just natural gravitation. But I wanted to bring this because really the Shekhinah, the concept of Rachel, the concept of kingship is weeping over the Jews in exile. And it Dafka began in the east and it went west. And to this day, the Jewish people are well ensconced in the Western world. Obviously, they are there for many, many good reasons, to gather up the sparks of holiness, to elevate the consciousness of the nations that they visit, and also to elevate their own concept of what it means to be a Jew. Because the rabbis teach us, if we merited, we wouldn't have to go into exile. That every nation would come to Jerusalem to learn Torah with us. Just like the 50 leaders of nations are coming to Jerusalem then tomorrow and the next few days to I wouldn't call it a celebration, rather to honor the International Holocaust Day. And this is a spark of consciousness that's being elevated. But 50 nations is not actually that many, when there's about 300 in the world. So, I don't get too excited about these things, but there is a bracha that you say when you sing a king, of a Jewish king and a non-Jewish king. We just had this in Masechet Brachot in the Daf Yomi, that Ashrei mi shero'eh melech Yisrael v'lo but also with that, Ashrei Mishro et Melech Umot Olam. And so too, a person is fortunate to see the king of the non-Jews. Well, why? The rabbis explain, because if he merits im zacha yachol lavchin bein melech Yisrael lebein melech umot, that if a Jew merits, he'll be able to see the difference between a non-Jewish and a Jewish king, and that distinction is the difference between heaven and earth. It's the difference between the Shekhinah and the soul of a human being. So if you can see the difference, then you'll know where you are when you're there. That's a big thing. So we're going to stop today's class now with that little bit about the idea of Rachel, the idea of the exile, the idea of this, the waning of the light in the west, and the rising of the light in the east, and the idea of that weeping is like squeezing that sponge to remove that old vision so that we can have a new one. And the new vision will bring us new insight and new joy and new love in the service of God. God bless all of you. We'll see you again on our daily classes on Patreon, on Facebook, on YouTube, and always Hashem be with you.